The story starts with Mikael, who is a journalist, walking out of a courthouse where he has lost a legal case against a wealthy businessman nicknamed Villain. The media is chasing Mikael for comments, but he ignores them and goes to a coffee shop to get a sandwich and coffee. On the other hand, Lisabeth, a private investigator, is at her client's office. Her client asks for her opinion on Mikael, who she has been investigating. Lisabeth tells her client that she thinks Mikael is a good person and is not involved in anything illegal. Later, we see Mikael spending time with his family and friends during the Christmas holidays. Later that night, Lisabeth enters Villain's apartment and takes pictures of his security system to prepare for hacking into it. The next day, Mikael receives a call from an attorney representing Henrik Vange, a wealthy man who wants to meet with him. Mikael travels to Sweden to meet Henrik, who offers him a job investigating the disappearance of his granddaughter Harriet 40 years ago. Meanwhile, Lisabeth meets a tech guy who gives her a custom-fit machine to help her with her investigation. Henrik believes one of his family members is responsible for her disappearance, and the killer also insults Henrik by sending him flowers on his birthday, which only Harriet did when she was alive. Henrik promises to give Mikael information on Villain, whom Mikael previously accused of wrongdoing, in exchange for investigating Harriet's death. Mikael accepts the job. Lisabeth returns to Villain's apartment, attaches the machine to the server box, and manages to escape unnoticed. The next morning, Mikael packs his things and leaves the city. Meanwhile, Lisabeth goes to visit her guardian, who is appointed by the government and is surprised to find out that he has had a stroke. Mikael arrives in Sweden by train and moves into an old cabin near Henrik's house. He also receives all the evidence related to Harriet's investigation the next day. Henrik tells Mikael about his family members who live nearby, including some who are Nazis, some who are alcoholics, and some who are abusive. He also visits the police officer who handled the previous investigation 40 years ago, but doesn't find any helpful clues. Lisabeth, unable to take care of themselves, had someone appointed to help her with important decisions and finances. However, the person who was appointed to help her was not a good person. He was fat and sleazy and accused Lisabeth of doing things that she did not do. This person then took control of their money and threatened to take away their freedom if they did not agree to let them be in charge. Lisabeth had no choice but to accept the situation, even though they were heartbroken about it. One evening, Mikael meets Harriet's brother, Martin, and learns about Harriet's mysterious disappearance. Martin tells him that after Harriet's disappearance, their family business started declining. Later, Lisabeth's bag gets snatched at the train station, and she finds out that her laptop inside is broken. The next morning, Mikael meets Cecilia, another family member, who tells him that he's investigating Harriet's case, and everyone in the family knows that Henrik sends him boxes containing investigations regarding the case. Cecilia suggests that if Mikael wants to dig deeper, he should meet her sister, who was very close to Harriet. However, the sister is currently living in London. Lisabeth goes to the social welfare office to ask her guardian for the money she needs. He starts making inappropriate advances, pulling her hand towards him. He then forces her to do something extremely uncomfortable, leaving her feeling sick and disgusted. After it's over, Lisabeth rushes to the bathroom to try and recover. When she comes back, he gives her the money she asked for, and she leaves as quickly as she can. As Mikael delves deeper into his investigation, he travels to London to speak with Harriet's cousin. During their conversation, he discovers that Harriet had a troubled past and faced difficulties, with her cousin pointing fingers at Harriet's parents and mentioning family issues. Meanwhile, Lisabeth calls her guardian for money to buy food, but instead, he invites her to his place. Upon arriving, she finds herself in a horrifying situation. The guardian leads her into a trap, placing her bag in a spot rigged with a hidden camera. Suddenly, he forcefully restrains her with handcuffs, causing her to lose consciousness from the struggle. When she regains consciousness, she's bound to the bed, gagged, and subjected to a sexual assault. Despite her desperate resistance, she is unable to fend him off. Back at his cabin, Mikael uncovers some photos that push his investigation forward. Lisabeth, still recovering from her suffering at her guardian's place, manages to make her way home with a check for food before taking a much-needed shower. The next day, Henrik, Mikael, and Mikael's wife gather for dinner at Henrik's place. Meanwhile, while examining photos from an event before Harriet's disappearance, Mikael notices her reacting to someone across the street before suddenly leaving. He decides to investigate further by visiting the building shown in the photo to ask about obtaining the negative. Lisabeth, fueled by a desire for justice, returns to her guardian's house under the excuse of needing more money. When he unsuspectingly lets her in, she incapacitates him with a taser, rendering him unconscious. Taking matters into her own hands, she strips and restrains him, then confronts him with evidence of his past actions, a videotape she recorded earlier. After securing her compliance with his demands, she ensures he understands the consequences of crossing her again. Before leaving, she makes a powerful statement by tattooing a condemning message on his chest. The next day, Mikael meets his daughter, who gives him a hint about the Bible that will soon help him with his investigation. Mikael points out some initials and numbers on Harriet's diary that she thinks are important. Mikael looks up those letters and numbers in the Bible and finds some violent punishments for sinners. He talks to the police officer on the phone and discovers that another girl with the same initials on her diary has gone missing, and her death was like the brutal punishments he found in the Bible earlier. While they're talking, Mikael sees an ambulance driving away from Henrik's house, revealing that Henrik got into an accident. Mikael then hires Lisabeth as his assistant to help him with the investigation, and she looks for similar cases in the police database. She finds out that all the murdered women had names from the Bible and were Jewish, which suggests that someone from Henrik's Nazi family might have committed the crimes. Lisabeth tells Mikael that Harriet was investigating the serial killer before her disappearance. Finally, Lisabeth sleeps on the couch, while Mikael goes to his bedroom for some rest. The following morning, they discover a disturbing sight outside their door: a dead cat, with its body mutilated and its limbs contorted into the shape of a symbol. Later, the same day, Mikael was shopping for groceries when he met a stranger who gave him a tip about a case from 1966. The stranger suggested that Mikael speaks to people at a nearby retirement home. Mikael followed the lead and met an old man who recognized a woman in a photo and thought she might still be alive. Mikael tracked her down and asked her some questions while Lisabeth, his partner, continued her investigation. One day, while Mikael was investigating an old house in the woods, he was shot at by an unseen sniper. Though he was only grazed, he managed to escape and returned to his cabin, where Lisabeth was setting up security cameras. After treating his wounds, Lisabeth entered his room and they both made love. The following day, Lisabeth went through the company's old archives, while Mikael met with Harriet's old relative to gather more photos. Lisabeth suspected Harriet's father of the murders, but was confused by how the murders continued even after his death. She continued to investigate and found out that Martin was responsible for the murders even after Harriet's father died. At the same time, Mikael grows suspicious of Martin. He sneaks into Martin's deserted house one night, armed with a knife for protection. As he explores, he stumbles upon Martin's collection of rifles. Martin unexpectedly arrives, and just as Mikael prepares to leave, Martin invites him inside. After a brief conversation, Martin reveals a darker side, pulling out a gun and leading Mikael into a hidden chamber where he's rendered unconscious by gas. When Mikael comes to, he finds himself restrained and facing Martin's camera, who expresses hateful views towards immigrants. Meanwhile, Lisabeth returns to her cabin to find it deserted, but discovers through security footage that Martin had been there. Mikael confronts Martin about Harriet's death, prompting Martin to reveal a history of abuse within their family. In a desperate struggle, Martin tries to suffocate Mikael before Lisabeth intervenes, rescuing Mikael and incapacitating Martin. Despite Lisabeth's efforts to stop him, Martin manages to flee. Lisabeth pursues Martin on her motorcycle. In a dramatic climax, Lisabeth catches up to Martin, causing his car to crash. Trapped and helpless, Martin meets his end when the car explodes, leaving his fate sealed in the flames. The police find a car the next morning, and Mikael wakes up in a cabin next to Lisabeth. They talk about how Lisabeth tried to kill her father when she was young, and Mikael tells her about Martin's anger when he mentioned Harriet. They both believe Harriet might still be alive and decide to travel back to London to ask her cousin if she knows anything. In London, they wait outside the cousin's apartment, and Mikael visits her and tells her about Martin's death. The cousin is not interested and dismisses him, They keep monitoring her calls and internet browsing, but find nothing useful. They return to their hotel and continue monitoring her. In bed, Lisabeth tells Mikael that Harriet is dead, but Mikael still thinks that there might be another possibility. The next day, Mikael visits the cousin's office, revealing the injuries he sustained from Martin's captivity. In a surprising twist, he accidentally addresses her as Harriet, only to learn that she is indeed Harriet. Mikael shows Harriet a photo, prompting her to disclose more about her traumatic experiences, including Martin's torment. Harriet shares her incredible story of survival, explaining how she assumed her cousin's identity to escape the country unnoticed. By using her cousin's passport, she managed to flee to London without raising suspicion. Harriet confesses to Mikael about her harrowing past, including her father's rape and abuse, and a fateful incident where she defended herself, unintentionally causing his death. With Mikael's support, Harriet finds relief knowing that the threats from her past are finally gone. The following day, Mikael and Lisabeth return to Henrik's mansion, where Henrik exchanges valuable evidence against Villain with Mikael, in exchange for help investigating Harriet's disappearance. After years of separation, Henrik and Harriet finally reunite, and they both break down in tears. But when Mikael checks the information provided by Henrik, he is disappointed to find that it is outdated and unusable. However, Lisabeth, who was already investigating Villain before Mikael hired her, offers to help him with the case. Mikael discovers that Villain was involved in illegal activities like money laundering, weapons, and drug trade, and had links with Russian crime syndicates. When Mikael publishes the story, it becomes an instant sensation, and Villain is investigated for his crimes. Meanwhile, Lisabeth borrows some money from Mikael to undergo a makeover, get a fake passport, and leave the country. She uses her hacking skills to steal Villain's money from his offshore bank accounts. A few days later, Villain is found dead after leaving the country. Finally, Lisabeth returns home and plans to gift Mikael. She buys him a leather jacket for Christmas, but when she sees him with another woman, she throws it away.